Now we can go.
Hello, my name is Kirill Linnik. Anyone doesn't know who I am? I have to do, normally I try to skip this part because it's the most boring part of a presentation. Why? So I'm a senior software architect at company Move Guides. We do people relocation software, and I'm also one of the founders of the DevClub communities in general. So we started in Tallinn almost 10 years ago. Actually 10 years ago in March. Yes, it's 10 years. And then something about 7 or 8 years ago we kicked off DevClub LV. Now, thankfully, led by Edgar's. Okay, so maybe then I start with why I do this talk. So as we do people relocation software, we obviously have lots of sensitive and personal data. And now everyone is so scary about GDPR, so we had to research that. So what it means, because people are screaming, "Ooh, GDPR is coming!" Everyone have to do stuff totally different way. Okay, let's invest in that. And then you open YouTube and you type in GDPR. What you see? You see presentation by people who are not really connected to IT, some consultants from US most probably, who tell us what we should do, and that's a little bit strange. So that's why I was the person who took this 88-page of really strange document. Nothing really specifically IT mentioned, nothing about Java, .NET, they don't write PHP at all, that kind of things. So, but they say how to live. And anyone knows about GDPR already? Raise your hands. Oh, some people know. Anyone loves kittens? Oh yeah. Anyone thinks they're connected?
We'll see.
If you ask Google, GDPR kitten, Google has lots of results. So obviously these things are connected. But first of all, okay, what is GDPR? It stands for Global Data Protection Regulation, really kind of bold statement. Still, it's made for European Union, by people in European Union. Still affects the whole world, somehow. You have to understand why GDPR is made, because it replaces 30 years old regulation where no internet, nothing about private data, a lot of people entering all that of their personal information somewhere and other people see it. So old one was outdated. It took 4 years to compile a new one, so that's why it's 88 pages. People were quite busy with that. And it's effective in 2 months. So I was really surprised to see so many not knowing people about GDPR, so it's only 2 months. It's a really game changer for IT industry, and I will explain why. And it can be interpreted in so many ways that sometimes you don't know what it means. So people who know about GDPR, are you ready? Do you comply? You can nod, you can raise your hands. I don't know how Latvians are doing that. That's tough. No one is doing that. Now I know. So Gartner says that by the end of this year, remember that starting from 25th of May, it's effective, but by the end of this year, half of the companies will not comply. And our research, TrustArc, they say blah blah blah, only 4% of companies claimed they are fully compliant, but 61% not even started. So let's see what GDPR is from user perspective. It's about just people want to understand. Okay, you use my data, what for? And they want to see what you have collected on them. Then, if they want to fix it, if something is wrong, they want to transfer the data from you to your competitor, for example, or take it out and see what is in there. And the most scary thing, everyone is pissed off about GDPR, is a right to be forgotten. Well, I just forget it. Forget me. I wasn't there. The main thing why GDPR has been done is to explain people that data, their data belongs to them. It has significant impact on their life. So what you enter in internet can influence your life in one or another way. And it's not only like just a place where you can spend time and have lots of fun, but sometimes it can have really negative effect. So like people should take it with responsibility. So let's start one by one with consent. So what consent means? It's your permission for data collected and processed. And should be clear and visible, with no predefined acceptance, in a human readable language, so people understand it. One really important thing which is stated in GDPR means one processing, one consent. Just a brief example. So for example, you collect email for sending spam out, and you collect mobile phone number for password to your account. That are two different processes. So people should tick the box in front of email saying, okay, I understand that this email will be used for spam, and tick checkbox in order to give you a right to collect the phone number that we know what it's for. And the last but not least, recall is the same easy as accept. It means that if they at some point don't wish to receive any spam, it should be a possibility for them in UI, so they uncheck and they will not get it. Why it's needed? I think everyone's seen these like famous comics when you install some browser and it has legal agreement which is 25 kilometers long, and you say, I don't want to read it, I accept it, and the next day you live on the street because this browser owns all your property. And actually, while preparing this presentation, I found one really interesting case when one was like a game publisher or something like that. They had an agreement with users, and one of the points of acceptance was that people are selling their souls to the devil. And imagine what? 5.7 thousand people were accepting that, because it was by default checked. And only 300 read it through, understood what it means, and unchecked it. And they got some discount, like £6 or something like that. But I mean, that's a famous case. And when you try to like understand what's the difference between a 5.7 and a 300, it means like only 5% of the people actually read it and then do something like that. So in order to avoid that, that's like, it's really funny we are in Microsoft house today because they are famous for these agreements and stuff. So how their life is changed in 2 months. What happens with, for example, Windows 10 installation agreement, they collect all these telemetrics and all that data, which they claim not personal, but actually it's personal because it has IP and that kind of things, which now, according to GDPR, belongs to personal data, and for that you have to have a consent and that kind of things. So, let's see. And you also have to understand that not all data is equal. So, racial or ethnic origins, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union membership. Anyone is in any trade union here?
Not yet.
Not yet. Genetic biometric data, health, sex and sexual orientation is what? Any ideas?
Sensitive.
It's sensitive data, but it also means that it's prohibited for collection and processing unless you manifestly, and it's several times mentioned in GDPR, manifestly make it public. So it means if I enter this state, it shouldn't be mandatory to enter, but if I enter this state, it's public for everyone. Or state allows collecting that. So for example, for visa reasons, if some states need some of that, or if you want to go to like some state authority, public authority, things like that. Well, Latvians ask questions.
Let's say sex. Questions about sex. Let's say I collect visitor gender.
Sex life and sexual orientation is not about sex.
Yeah, but
That's
like,
little bit different.
but where does sex life start and or
Sex life is
like
sexual,
gender is
like
okay?
gender is okay. But when it's asked like whatever what you like,
That's tricky.
that becomes tricky. And the more tricky part actually here is biometric data. Now, photos of people are sensitive data. True. True story. It means actually two things. Like imagine a situation when you ask your users to upload a real picture and somewhere on backend processing you actually have some machine learning analyze whether it's real picture or not. And you say if you'll not do that, you're not allowed to use our site. Or even more interesting situation when Mr. Black, this nice cat with long black hairs, enters the picture and you analyze that and say, looking on your profile, I think you might gonna need to meet these ladies here, also black. So, doesn't seem to be really legal. So, why it's needed? Basically, yeah, people want to know how this data, how their data is used, and the main idea behind that, and also like for rule to be able to check it, is to prevent discrimination. So you're not collect, or if you collect, somehow not through third parties, people can check what data is collected, and then maybe if you collect something from the previous list, it leads to a thought that maybe discriminate. Oh, I have big eyes, I will get low. Doesn't seem to be good. And another funny fact from IT, it also helps to reverse engineering processing algorithms. So you cannot ask your competitors, guys, give me your algorithms or your business logics. But you can find some volunteers, ask them to enter some data, ask what data is collected, ask output of some, I don't know, loans or whatsoever result, and then using the same machine learning and stuff to understand how your competitors are making decisions. So, be careful with that. You also have to understand there are two types of data about people, so manually inserted. So, if people are entering data manually, and it means that should be able to see this data in the same UI. And automatically generated, which you should provide on demand and in machine readable format. And free of charge. Here's asterisks. Any idea what it could mean?
Some processing charges or data, something?
Well, in GDPR, it actually means business idea. So, according to GDPR, it says like on the first request, it should be free. But when it's stated, if person on some frequent base, and it's not also like marked what means frequent. It said like some frequent basis, ask for personal data, and it can be costly for you or not convenient when you can whenever reject or ask money. So it's a joke, a little bit, but maybe some people do this joke real. So next time, like first time per day, clicking on your profile and checking your data is free. Next time is €100. Can be a good business.
Question.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
finally.
Are there any rules against adding, check your profile at the end of sign-up session? And so you look at your initial data, that's free, you check your profile, and then you're on the hook for...
As I said, there is no clear definition what means frequent query. It's said like on a frequent basis. That's the state.
So all it says is first time's free.
No, all it says it should be free, but if it's on a frequent basis, then you can, whenever reject, ask money. As I said, like it's really tricky from definition perspective. So people need data fix. Why it's needed? Why this right is given to them? Actually, it's right to influence the result of data processing. You should also be careful that it doesn't mean that you can enter whatever data you want. It's not your right to abuse the system. It's your right to change. Like, I don't know, you don't want anyone to know that you've been in jail. Just to say, I will not enter this data. And the funny fact is, don't forget you have right not to be subject, and that's like a basically quote, subject to decision based solely on automated processing. What it means, if data is collected automatically about you, some decision is made, no human involved, then you can opt out from that kind of decisions.
I have a question about Google AdWords and ads in general.
Yeah, we will come to it.
Okay, cool.
And here in GDPR also listed some examples. What means significant effect? Loans, e-recruiting, what else? Related to your work performance, health, economic situation, and then personal preferences or interests. That's about your question. So, I think not everyone is fan of tracking or internet tracking. And what everyone basically sees a situation like that, when you've got email and one Google comparison checks the content of email and it says, okay, some company sends you some invitation to join their site and okay, they understand what this company is doing and provide that to their competitors. And should be possible to opt out. Not like, here should be careful, not opt out from advertisement at all, because that's how they get their money. But you should be possible to opt out for this tailored stuff and say, I want only generic ads. So don't follow me, don't track me, only generic. I want kittens, I want dogs, I want everything, just not based on a content. Currently not possible, and I think that's a big change for advertisement industry, because actually that's where money lays. They try to profile people in really short amount of time and understand what ads to show, to display them. And with GDPR, with like possibility to opt out from that kind of thing, I don't know how it influences their business. And if you still hate this company, yeah.
Quick question, but Google already has option to opt out of targeted ads, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's actually the same thing. The battery is running low. Edgar's. We want to plug a PC. Let's see. So yeah, that's the thing. So, but this thing should be everywhere.
But how about geo-targeting? There's an option like, let's say, show ads only to people in Latvia by their IP address.
Yes, so it's about the targeting, but these people in Latvia can opt out on a targeted apps, and they want to see still something. Because this is like automatic decision.
But let's say I show ads based on user's location. Like
that's exactly the question.
If you're
Repeat.
here,
No.
so I should.
No, I mean
It's tough.
It's that's what I'm saying. It's tough. If you say I don't want to see Latvian language, like actually Edgar's asked me to present this talk in Latvian several times. I had to opt out. And finally I'm here. So that's the same thing. You like should be possible to opt out of any targeted thing. Or another decision, you have the zillion of Chinese people who actually press OK button. Wait, check. It's okay for you to display this.
Yeah, so maybe you already told this, but let's say I'm evil and I don't care, I still show ads. What will happen to me? Like, will there be some ads police?
Yes, we will
Yes.
talk. Yes.
Ads police.
Do you do ads? Okay. So you still treat some company. You want to transfer data to their competitors and tell them to do so, and still they can refuse. If it has significant influence on their financial reports and cost living and so on and so forth. Okay, let's have one more try. Ask them to forget your data, and that's the famous with right to be forgotten. So when people talk about that, it's all the time reminds me of this famous movie MIB, Men in Black, and just like press the button and it didn't happen. IT reality of right to be forgotten. Right to be forgotten means your data should be detached from processing, including searching and displaying, and stays immutable. In other words, it means it's okay to soft delete, scrap the data, and restrict for further modification. Lots of people asking about, okay, what about backups? It means you can leave backups as they are. So right to be forgotten, don't apply on backups and things like that. But there is one trick. So if you restore from a backup, or if you use backup for restoring, so if you have a backup, then person applied right to be forgotten, and when something happened and you want to restore, for person it means still the same. He applied his right. So, like if it's not persisted in a backup, it's your fault, it's not person's fault. And that has a significant impact on how you do backupping. And some data should be rock solid, like I know implementation of right to be forgotten. So I know some companies did it like basically in Google's spreadsheet, just a person who wants to be forgotten, just mark them there because hopefully Google spreadsheet will not crash. Maybe you should put it on paper sometimes.
And hope your house doesn't burn down.
Well, then you have to have 2 copies. Not in the different towers, but...
But if I want to be forgotten from the list of people who want to be forgotten?
No, right to be forgotten applies to services and collecting data, not applied to on list of writing. Forgotten.
When you write my name down, that's like identifiable data?
No, it's not your name down, it's ID.
Okay, so they can't write my name down.
They cannot write your name down, because that's already a Spencer personal thing. Yes.
Good, then do like this.
Another trick is don't forget to notify our third parties. It means if you collect the data and you send it out to someone else for further processing whatsoever, and person implemented right to be forgotten, then you have to say, other guys, okay, sorry, like something happened, and please forget this guy too. Yeah?
Is there a requirement to notify third parties in a way they understand, or I just send them an info@thirdparty.com, hey, delete this guy?
Basically, it's say notify. That's what it says in GDPR.
And the ad police will think further.
Yeah, and do it basically if it doesn't significantly affect your business. I like this phrasing in GDPR, it's really cool. So you ask me, what shall I do with that? I'm IT guy, I don't care. Right? Let's start with one thing. Should you comply at all? So, the right of protection, and that's already called from GDPR, right of protection of personal data is not an absolute right. Okay, they tell us like, be careful what you enter, like we have to check it and things like that, and then they say like, it's not an absolute right. What it means, regulation does not apply to issues of protection of fundamental rights and freedoms. So, Rights for your personal data is not a fundamental right too. And it can be overridden with activities concerning national security, for example. I just let you enjoy that. So in other words, if state wants data from you, forget about GDPR. And also, like it's, as you see in this phrasing, it doesn't say like for the whole company. I suspect that at least for this data set we want from you, and we have our rules to comply. Couple of examples. Like 1 month ago, I've been in one bank in order to change limits for our DevClub for payment, daily limits. Somehow I wasn't able to do it in internet banking. And I came there and they said, I'm living there for 4 years. We have 4A4 quiz questionnaire for you to fill. Please do so. And this A4A4, they're asking about our partners, how we get the money, whenever we have partners from abroad, from outside EU, whenever some of us belongs to some public authority, and lots of things. And strangely, at least half of this quiz can be filled fully automatically looking on our transactions. From the remaining part, half of these things can be, again, I don't know about Latvia, in Estonia you can ask different authorities and then provide data about belonging to like different political parties and that kind of things. You can ask this data. So at least 75% you can enter fully automatically, and now 25% said, what the fuck? We have GDPR, and we say Anti-Money Laundering and Anti-Terrorist Act. Big document. Fuck it. Another example, I used to work in one telecom company, you also know. Again, I don't know about Latvia. In Estonia, all telecom companies provide API for national security police to query different SMS geolocations and stuff. So it's fully automated stuff. It shouldn't be like that. So some person does some track, and then he realizes that phone was with him. He runs into telco office and say, "Oh, please forget me. Forgot like all data. Please erase everything." No, there is a data which should be really, really stable, and that's one of these. So there are really like huge amount of exceptional cases. You should think really carefully. If state wants some data from you, ask them, okay, should I implement GDPR? Most probably no. But even if you should, as mentioned several times already, you can ignore. For existing solutions, in case you can prove that making GDPR compliant has a significant impact on your business, adjustment can be postponed with only one exception: consent. What it means? Basically, again, idea of GDPR, so people realize that data has significant value. It's not about making every second IT or company which is related to IT, which means every second IT, become bankrupt because they have to comply. But in GDPR, there is self-renewal mechanism, or I call it like that. So every 4 years, every country provides report about what's the current situation about GDPR compliance, companies comply, don't comply, data breaches and things like that, and based on that report, they can restrict some things. So that's why I put postponed in a quote, because currently it said you cannot, you can avoid it, that's all. But I believe that at least in 4 years, some regulations become more strict. And consent, that's something you have to do right now, or relatively soon. And as you understand, for new solutions, GDPR compliance is by default and by design. There's also like really...
Excuse me, how would that cost? consent be implemented in existing systems? Like, for example, I have a service and I have a lot of customer emails. What do I do now?
Now, if they already collected,
Yes.
you should not provide the consent. It's about consent is on collection
Okay.
time. So you adjust your UI explaining why you collect email.
Oh,
That's it. That's the consent.
okay.
There's like really thin line between existing solution and new solution. So if your existing solution is only released now and major part of functionality becomes later, what it means, is it a new solution or is it like still existing solution? I cannot answer this question. There is no answer about this question in GDPR as well. That's something these public authorities will judge whenever it's a new solution or old solution. And that's, again, really tricky part. So from IT perspective,
Is there any difference between people as clients and people as employees? For example, if I want to put the images of all my employees on my company website.
they have to give you consent.
Okay.
There's one trick you can do, but you have to justify it. There are certain things you can override in your labor contract about like some information you want to collect, but you have to justify that. Just not saying I want to collect a picture and your sexual beliefs and that kind of things, just because I want to know everything about you. That will not work. Like you have to relate it somehow to work. So from IT perspective, you have to explain people what is collected, why you're collecting that, why you enter this data. Help to show data, make this view my profile bold in the center of a page, something like that. And basically help them to fix it. Again, educating them and explaining, for example, you haven't been updating your home address for 2 years, maybe parcel will be delivered into wrong location, please check it. That kind of things, and then with direct link. That kind of just helping them with your system and explaining why this data is important for them. Export and import. With export is pretty obvious. About import, I think it's a good idea if all your competitors will implement export, you'll be the first one who is implementing import, because normally people switching between the companies because they don't like something in existing company and they want a better service. So if you have an import, you can consume this data, understand why they've been treated in that way in previous company and serve them better. So simply think about that. And forget it. So right to be forgotten, it's not only about this. I really call you to understand the life cycle of your data, which means you have to understand why you don't need it. It's not they come to you and say, please delete me. So if you understand that this person will not come anymore, or like everything is delivered, things like that, he closed his account, you can delete his or at least scrap his personal information, and that's it. And you do it already in your process of development. You should not like think about this right to be forgotten, because actually it's your implementation by default. Okay, you can still leave financial data, things are paid, that should be according to law, like 6-7 years, something like that, but it should not have any personal information still, like who paid that. A good start, not written in GDPR, seen in one different presentation, make that inventory. Basically understand what data you are collecting. Whenever you're collecting actually data you need, maybe there's some crap you collect just because someone said so. And the last but not least, you also understand in which places you collect the data. It will help you to put consent in the right place as well. and do data processing principles, kind of blueprint for IT department. So if business comes and say, please add another field so people understand when it's sensitive data, and it shouldn't be mandatory, it's not sensitive data, then it should be deleted with all personal information deletion, or things like that. Just people understand it already by default during implementation. Some people, when you mentioned GDPR, said, okay, now we need to hire one more guy. And they call it officer. True, there is one term, data protection officer, basically security and GDPR expert, reporting to the board, escalating always possible data breaches, helping to prevent them, things like that. Funny fact is, person not financially responsible for failures. Kind of is, no pressure, I am doing my best guy. Just like that. And actually, you need it in only two cases. If you're a public authority, except courts, or large-scale sensitive data processing is your core business. And even if you need it, it can be outsourced. So, like there's famous saying, remember that tweet. So in 2 months, lots of ex-certified Scrum Masters, or people like that, will switch to certified data protection officers and provide services to the companies. I'll secure your data, no pressure. I'm not still financially responsible for that, but I'm security expert. What it means? Yeah.
I have a question. Recently, Google Mail for corporate domains asked me to choose a data protection officer. It was a very long description of what is he responsible for. But maybe you know and can explain us in short.
First of all, if you don't, like Google is doing it by default. They are not checking your business, they are simply asking. You can say, no, we should not have this person. And again, why you should have this person? Whenever you're a public authority, again, it means you're working for the state, except courts, or you do large-scale data processing, which means, according to GDPR, and let's read it all together, considerable amount of personal data at regional, national, supranational level, and which could affect a large number of data subjects, which likely to result in a high risk. I really like it. I mean, actually, that's already 3rd version of prerequisites when in DPO. First was if you have more than 250 people. Then we said, okay, you have 250, maybe only one of them is installing Windows, and that's all our connection to IT. Maybe it's not good definition. Second was about the budget, but budget is also really tricky because there's a not really kind of line you can put between IT budget, real budget, and that kind of things. That's the 3rd version. So for me it's a question, again, like I mentioned in Latvia, you have sex shop, really popular one for the whole country. So what it means? Is it considerable amount? Things like people entering their personal addresses, like it looks like considerable amount. Data national level, true. Could affect large number, basically whole country, and result in a high risk. Yes, I don't want any kind of information to be leaked like that, right? So should I have DPO in that case?
Yes.
That's a question of the interpretation. Who will decide? Who will decide? So European Data Protection Board is already established, so to speak, organization, people already working, get money, everything is cool. So every state should have at least one supervisor authority. I don't know about Latvia again, maybe you have one, in Estonia we still don't. And I talked to some big companies and they said that's a really tricky moment because they don't believe that highly educated and skilled professionals are something state can attract from a money perspective. So one of 2 things might happen. whenever they are not highly educated, skilled people, which is really huge risk, because then they can say everyone, even if you do like e-shop with one person, you have to have TPO, or these people will simply stay at work until they get better offer from big companies. That's a tricky one. And another example from UK. In UK we already have ICO, Internet Controller Organization. They forked GDPR basically and made it more strict. And so in order to comply, be GDPR compliant in UK, you have to, like, soft delete is not enough for them. One of the examples, we said you have to at least scrap the data, better delete it from everywhere. So question of people who will decide on these really vague definitions is really bold. So currently for GDPR no certification process available, but it shall be voluntary and available via process that is transparent. So like now we have this VeriSign, that kind of things, and also soon it will be, I guess, GDPR compliant methods on site. Fines are in place, that's your question. So lots of open questions, but fines already there. So 4% of annual turnover, not profit by turnover, or 20 million euro, whichever is bigger. Another asterisk, any ideas? My Latin friends?
Up to?
Huh?
Up to?
No. It's up to, yes, so there are different degrees how you can...
First time for 10.
Huh?
First time for 10, not 20. Like if you break first time, then it's going to get less, like half of them.
Now, they said that there are several rules. If you break, then you get maximum already. So there are like different levels, which are strict or less strict. So starting from 2% or 10 million, up to 4% and 20 million. But you can have this one straight away. Again, it really depends on people here.
Those highly educated people, right?
Let's hope so. And this asterisk in his presentation means welcome to Estonia. Sorry, my Latvian friends, there are only 2 countries mentioned by name in GDPR. One of them is Denmark, when I said that if you're not GDPR compliant, that's a criminal case. Ooh. And second is Estonia. Said in Estonia, the fine is imposed by supervisory authority in the framework of misdemeanor procedure, which actually in Estonia means you cannot have fines like that. So you can, but you can send your DPO, like, you know, clean the streets if that is breached. But they recommend still apply it, and then they said it should be adequate and things like that, and so on and so forth. And now, example about Estonia continues. But actually, it's a little bit outdated stuff. So I had this talk 1 month ago in a DevClub, Russian DevClub in Tallinn. Next week, Estonian government applied this fine. So they changed the law after my presentation. So Latvia is huge. Some people say I don't care my sites or my services are in Russia. Like, who cares about GDPR, right?
True story.
True story. I have 2 news for you, and both are bad. First of all, GDPR is applied to any site service able to serve your resident. It means even if your site has geo IP check, I cannot visit it from European Union. If I go to Russia, I am Estonian citizen. I open your site, order the stuff, it has to be GDPR compliant, full stop. And asking about fines, the board of the supervisory authority has the right to block, ban service providers, regions, whole countries if they don't comply. Which means As I see it, it will bring sanctions on brand new level, or might bring sanctions on brand new level. And another thought I had is, you know that data about Russian citizens should be stored in the Russian servers nowadays. Now GDPR takes place. About America, if you work with, we work with American defense companies, and it means whole data should be stored in US servers. And only people with US citizenship can process that and touch that and that kind of things. So with all regulations like that, as I see it, map of internet, which used to be open, becomes more and more similar to political map. So maybe sooner or later you have to have visa to open some site, or have special permit to open some site in some other country, things like that. So it's all goes there. And another funny fact about GDPR, the fact whenever you are compliant is not or not is dependent on the compliance of third parties you are using, and their third parties they are using, and their third parties they are using, and so on and so forth. Which means, for example, we have a site which is hosted on Amazon, and for some data processing they send this data elsewhere, and they send the data elsewhere. Whole chain should be GDPR compliant. If one breaks the GDPR compliance, whole chain is not GDPR compliant. And the one who breaks the chain gets fined. So, the most important question about today. So I told you this presentation. My thoughts about that. Now the final question, should kittens comply?
Yes.
Raise your hand who thinks kittens should comply.
Yes.
You drink beer? Yes? Okay, fine. The answer is no. GDPR is only for natural persons, people like you and me, not for companies. It is still safe to say to use picture of kittens because they don't have right to be forgotten. You can have all silly pictures of kittens in your presentation, and I ask you to do it next time because with people, as you see, it becomes more and more tricky with every regulation like that. But please don't use monkeys or apes because some companies start to block that because they think that monkeys in unnatural condition can offend monkeys and apes, but that's a different story. People still should comply. Not more grades, hire engineers, not kittens. And we have Q&A session. Edwards, we did it twice.
What?
They did it twice. Clapped.
So that means that they will not clap next speakers.
Maybe, like, do you have time for Q&A?
Yes, we do.
Me.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm some site, I collect some data, and I say that I delete everything, but in reality I don't delete. So that supervising authority will come and audit me?
Yes, so there is a possibility for audit. There are some hints that can check for access for data, for source code and that kind of things. Again, depends on how smart they are. Maybe you write on ISM or things like that. You don't understand.
Just something yellow. Okay.
You told about the case of storing the ratio or but what if one can determine uniquely your race by your name? For example,
No, that's not true. At least I hope so. I know one lady named Oksana Topor doesn't know a word in Russian, so
But Jamal,
Estonian. So like
Jamal is surely not Estonian.
next question.
I had one contradiction that I know by this far. You mentioned that soft deletion is okay. That would mean like if I mark data in database as deleted and don't use afterward is kind of okay. But as I have heard this part that it's not okay, you have to delete it physically, it cannot be.
No, I mean, recommend you to do
It's
it.
your recommendation.
It's my recommendation. Yes. Again, in UK,
Yeah.
and they want to go out like to have this Brexit stuff, and they have this regulation when they actually ask for data scrap, which means pseudonymization.
Mhm.
So for them, soft delete is not okay anymore.
But it is still overridden by local government, yes?
Yes.
So you can still say, I need to keep my data for 4 years and it's...
No, they cannot make it less strict. They can make it more strict, but they cannot make it less strict. So some examples about personal data. They also mentioned in GDPR social security number, which in a country like Estonia is not a highly sensitive data. But there are countries in the European Union still where it's a sensitive data because out of that you can know gender, birth date, and that kind of things. And I think it's really sensitive. So like that state to decide whether it's sensitive or not. So and there are lots of things like that, but you cannot say that it can be fully publicly available. I said it's personal information, should be treated under GDPR, but you can make it even more strict and assign a sensitive type on it. Other questions? Yeah, there's one.
You mentioned there should be an option for a person to fix its data.
Yes.
How does it apply to automatically collected data?
Automatically collected data is not fixable. I mean, for basically for manual collection or a collection which you can display on a site. For example, you get it from a third party, like from some public authority or something like that, and it's wrong. And you can say, okay, we just grabbed this information and it's important for you, please fix. It's not just, please fix all my clicks previous couple of years. Yeah.
I as a user still see targeted advertisements, but I don't know who is showing it to me. What should I do?
Basically, actually, besides this public authority, there is another NGO should be created, which helps to investigate cases like that. So if you don't know, you refer to this NGO and say like that's a really tricky situation, and they have to be again IT professionals. So they have to investigate and check and then decide whether it's GDPR related or not. So if you don't know, ask them. If you know, you can go to public authority directly and say they are not GDPR compliant. Yeah.
Is IP in GDPR mentioned as personal
Yes.
data? But just IP alone, like let's say
Yes.
it comes from a fridge or some I/O device.
Yes, but still somehow IP providers are assigning this data to some locations, and they actually know where this IP was assigning to. So by that you can reverse engineer and understand what's a person. So they said IPs and that kind of things, personal data.
In the same way, shouldn't Facebook ID be personal data? Because you can look up the names through this Facebook ID.
That's a nice question. Ask Facebook. Or Google. Google should
What
know.
about nicknames? You usually use the same nickname also.
Nothing about nicknames. I would say I haven't read about that, but if you by nickname can identify the person uniquely, that might be. We also discussed on the DevClub about voice. So voice should belong to personal data, that kind of things.
So, similar question, previous one.
Facebook, ask Facebook.
No, not that one. Where does the user's data ownership end? When does that data is no longer the user? For example, an IoT product like a home thermostat that records like the temperature at home. I have it hooked up to my account, and well, it collects the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
When I say, okay, I want to be forgotten, does the service provider need to delete back all that temperature data that is being collected?
Now, temperature data, again, it's not a personal data. He has to delete personal data.
Personal
So he can keep it as long as it's not linked to me.
Yes, you can keep it as long if by looking on data and going through relations, you cannot understand who is the person behind that. That's okay to store that.
What about cases when other people write about other people in comments, in complaint sites?
Again, yes, that situation is handled on GDPR, and that's it. All these cases are applied if data belongs to a set of people. Then all decisions based on data should be based on collective acceptance of this thing. So I think if everyone wants to be forgotten, then you have to forget all the data. If only one person out of 100, then others don't, then sorry. So in this case, if you leave some comments or somewhere on the wall or things like that from a social network, tagging someone, that's really doesn't only belong to you. And in this case, it's really hard to treat.
Let's do
last question.
in this way. If I enter your name on your profile, does it belong to you or me as the enterer?
Or
Ask the same question. Ask Facebook.
Well, not on Facebook, but on...
Someone has to be the authority, so
Yeah.
you can be the authority.
So,
and interpret this.
As I said, there are lots of tricky moments which you cannot say explicitly that's the right solution. And these people from this authority will tell you that's the right solution. That's why I just try to raise awareness that look on CV sites whenever they're looking for that people and who applied and who are they, so know it better. So with that, while we're clapping, now all presenters do that. I do a picture, and you clap. And that's it.
Thank you. I have official part. Thank you.
Oh, you have kittens.
Now, live. Usually we have chocolate, but those kittens ate it. And now they will explode, so you get exploding kittens.
Age 7+ fainting. So,
Thank you.